Good to go? All right. So welcome councillors and welcome members of the community viewing in on live stream for this meeting to further discuss signage. I would like to commence the meeting as we traditionally do with the acknowledgement of country and pay respects to the Darrinmal people, their traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and all Indigenous community members in Livingstone. We have a apology from Councillor Mata. She has been held up by roadworks, so she will be joining us a little bit later. But we'll proceed with the agenda, ladies and gentlemen. I've drawn a blank on mine. I'm not getting anything. Thank you. Right. So just skipping through the agenda items, ladies and gentlemen, we have, as I said, Councillor Mata is an apology at this stage, will be joining us later. We have no leave of absences or apologies apart from Councillor Mata. Are there any declarations of interest in matters on the agenda today, councillors? No, thank you. Item 5, there's no public forums or deputations. Item 6, no business arising or outstanding from previous meetings. This is actually an ongoing meeting from, sorry, not a continuation, but an additional meeting from last week. Presentation of petitions is nil. No councillor or delegate reports. Nothing from the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. And that brings us to item 10. Thank you, Mr. CEO. I have that now, which is the Mulberry signage and placemaking. So, Mr. CEO, I might pass the gavel to you on this one, just to introduce the report again to the councillors, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, this is an extension discussion of something that's been going on, and as councillors are aware, there has been discussion and work going on both internally and with external parties to the organisation on this topic for some time, both in relation to the matter of broader boundary and identity signage, but also specifically the item today as it relates to Mulberry. The boundary signage, as you know, was determined at a meeting last week with a follow-up discussion anticipated to be had on that topic next week, but the matter was in the main settled last week. So today is about what entry statement and other features might best suit the Mulberry township based on that work that's been done over a period of time. Councillors have previously been briefed on proposals for a series of themed town entry statements, and the proposal before you today is the features the large lettering and what was originally the accompanying sculpture with that to characterise the different towns. Mulberry was to be the first of these, but rightly there's been some matters raised in relation to the consultation with folk about the appropriateness of what was proposed. Officers have revisited the different options that were stepped through at last week's meeting, and there's a series of recommendations proposed now, and rather than put those as a package of things, we think it would probably work best if we stepped through those individually, which will give a much clearer signal of councillors' willingness to proceed with one or other elements, rather than asking you to adopt a package together which might not enjoy the level of comfort as the individual items do. We've obviously been trying to reconcile a number of different views on things, and that's never easy when elements of creativity are involved. It's complicated by some external funding timelines and outlays that have already been made to suppliers, so that the situation we find ourselves in is one that none of us would prefer to be or would prefer to not be in. But it is the case that those circumstances are in front of us. So hopefully some decisions can be taken today that provide certainty for all. Both Russell and Sonia have joined us again today, and as they have done in the past, are available to provide and respond to questions, provide the detailed information that you might require. It is fair to say that we haven't pressed designers and other suppliers for to explore other options in detail, because obviously those people who have committed some time and resources to this effort already, we didn't want to unnecessarily trouble them with more work in the event that might not translate into jobs. But we will do the best that we can to respond to or estimate responses for you to enable decisions to be made. Otherwise, there are a series of recommendations made to you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. So, councillors, as you would have seen in the report, there are 3 officer recommendations, and as the CEO has just outlined to you, that they have been split to allow consideration of each individually. There was a feeling from the meeting, following the meeting last week, that the fact that the recommendations were combined may have caused some unease or discomfort with the councillors, that part of the recommendation may have been acceptable to councillors and other parts may not. So they've been split this week for separate consideration by us. So is everyone comfortable with the process? Okay. All right, so councillors, are there any questions at this stage before we go into debate? And I think we can hopefully go into debate fairly early and then just work through each of the individual recommendations. But are there any questions to start with?
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Chairman. To Sonia and Russell, good morning. I have 3 questions, revisiting some questions from a week ago. The first question is council still liable for that $56,000 that could be lost in the long run? Are we still liable for that?
I believe via our procurement policy we would. We have not yet notified the supplier in writing, as we would need to if council makes a decision not to go ahead. They would then have to come back to us in writing with clarification, which they already have, but they would have to do that again as part of that process, and that money would have to be expended from council. It wouldn't be expended from Works for Queensland funding. Okay,
thank you. Thanks for that. The second question that I have is yesterday there was some further information that was brought forth to councillors. Could you explain what that information was, Sonia?
Was that could you tell me regarding conversations with...
regarding conversations in relation to the conversations that there has been further contact with the residents at Mulberry?
Oh, sorry, yes, I did speak to Sue from the Mulberry store last week, just to, she was one of the proponents that was handing out a lot of the consultation when we originally did it 3 times, and she was an advocate for the signage. So I just called her last week and just asked her opinion on what she thought and the general feeling she got from people in the town. More, it was about the actual township improvements, more so than anything.
So it had nothing to do with the white signage?
Yes, I did ask her about the white signage. She did say, she indicated that a lot of people in town, they'd like the ball, but the cost of it was too much, they felt. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors, before we go into debate? Yes, Councillor Eastwood.
In relation to what recommendation B, do we have a price of the totem pole?
No, we don't, Councillor, and as the CEO said, we have yet to go back to the artist. If Council did decide they wanted something like that there, we would then go back to the artist and suggest that we would want the sign with the 1 kilometre, and it may not have to be a totem pole, but some way of indicating some of the services in the town. That was one thing that's come through from all the people we've talked to, is they want to ensure that whoever's, you know, passing by is actually aware of what is available in the town, and encourages people to pull over and visit the township. So, yeah, we haven't not got a cost on that, and we would have to go back to find that out.
Right.
Councillor
Sorry,
Watson.
through the mayor to Sonia and Russell. I do recall in the previous meeting that when we went from the idea of the square sign with "We Want You" and that when you flicked over to the totem pole sign, that you said there was no added cost.
We had not yet received a final
No,
cost.
at that time you said, Russell said there was no, there wouldn't be a difference in the cost of the sign.
I think that was capturing it within the 3 signs.
Yeah, we're still doing the 3 signs though in some ways, aren't we?
No, not that I'm aware of.
All right, thank you.
Other questions, Councillor?
Probably only, I'm not preempting my position one way or the other, but the totem style pole, or the concept of that, in principle, the Mulberry community appeared to be supportive of that. Potential budgets for that, have we, given that the TMR signs were around $5,000, is it, you know, is there a range? Are we looking at perhaps 5,000 or 7,000? I guess for me, importantly, it's not going to be 25,000 or 40,000, but at the lower end of the scale to achieve, you know, that interpretive signage in terms of what's in there. If it's of a lower scale in costings, is that something that you believe is achievable?
It'll be lower scale. I can't tell you what it's going to be though, because we don't have the costing on it. If it's going to be like that, or it's some other version with the different services on there, you know, I can't tell you at this point. I don't know that we presented that particular sign to the community. So
Mine-
they're not aware of that totem.
No, that the concept of providing details to potential customers to Mulberry, so they understood that there's a historical society, this is,
Right.
you know, there's a service station, there's
Yeah.
that type of information.
That has gone to the community as is an entirely separate Get Involved survey. So we asked the community exactly what they wanted on the sign, and the responses
Yeah.
to that are indicative on that sign and that other sign that
Yep.
we had as well. Yes, so we
I-
did do that.
Okay, so the last question on that, it would be important for me to, I guess, set some parameter around what the costing of that would be, so that there's some control over the investment in that. If indeed the table support that, I would want to premise that on, you know, up to an amount that we think is reasonable for a sign of that nature, so we're not got an open checkbook to potentially blow. We'll spend a lot of the money on that sign, and that shortfalls the other elements within the community that we also have identified that potentially are important. So I'm probably looking for guidance either from the CEO as to how that could be achieved, or
If I can, Mr Mayor, probably picking up Councillor Watson's question and Councillor Bellows, and just reiterating what Russell had to say. So the totem style pole is a replacement for the wanted sign, intended to deliver a similar style of thing, but alongside the feature out on the highway. We've used totem style because that's the concept that was presented to. It hasn't been finally designed, and therefore it is a fairly loose concept at the moment to put a number on. But if the council was of a mind to cap, you know, put a ceiling on what the expenditure for that might be, at $10 or $15 or $20,000 or whatever, some lower figure, the intent is clearly to signal to people what services and facilities are available in town. If there was a ceiling budget, we would work with the designer on something that achieves that.
And it may not end up as a totem pole, it maybe, that like a single sheet, like the single sheet, your wanted sign was going to be cheaper, obviously. With that one, you've got multiple different signs, and if they're of different shapes, then, you know, that adds to the cost as well. So it's likely not going to be that you know, antiquated kind of sign style like that. It's more likely just to be, you know, rectangular sign elements.
All right. Any other questions? Councillor Mata?
Mr Mayor, I apologise for being late.
No, we got your message, thank you.
Stop goes everywhere.
Yeah.
Are we in suspension of standing
No,
orders?
no, we're just in question time before we go into debate, Councillor. We haven't suspended standing
I
orders
think
or
this
anything.
one really needs suspension, Mr Mayor, because there's a lot of questions that are unanswered here. I've probably been through this so many times. I am certainly not happy, and I kind of get a feeling that the table has a feeling as to that effect as well. I want to know why the recommendation A is the same as the one that was voted down last week.
It was discussed before you got here, Councillor, so the reason each of these now are separate was because there was a feeling following the meeting last week that some of the councillors may have been comfortable with some elements of the overall recommendation, but there are other elements they weren't comfortable with, if I said that correctly. But in splitting them now, it gives the opportunity to address each of the individual recommendations from last week's to analyse those down further and vote on them individually. So that's the process for this week that the office.
I can understand that, Mr Mayor.
Yeah.
And when we're looking at, it's a real shandy. It's a real shandy, this recommendation. We all agree that, I think we do, that we have a sign to say Marlborough kilometre, 1 kilometre arrow. And I think there's a consensus that perhaps we need some sort of a totem pole that says, what's there? That's it. It's not there with the white sign. It's not there. It's not what they want. It's not what they want. It's not what they need. Mr Mayor, there's one other big glaring question here. Why are we only looking at one entrance when we've got 2 entrances? We're putting all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak.
All right, well, perhaps that's a question we can direct to the CEO and the officers.
And another thing, Mr Mayor, I've got yellow things here. In Byfield the other day, at Woodbury, on the highway, just caught my eye. It's the same sign. It's very simple. I don't know if Councillor Watson had a chance to look at it on the way home. Did you see it? And that, I think, I'm not saying that's the sign.
Well, Councillor, I think we might, is there a
I'm just saying
question?
you might cut things short, Mr Chairman.
Is there a question though? Or are we better to leave this to
I think this needs to
debate?
be considered, what I'm going to say.
Yeah, no, but is it best left for debate or is it a question?
Well, that's why I was hoping we're in standing orders.
Yeah, well, we haven't done that yet. I'm just saying, is this a question for the officers or is it something we should leave for debate?
Well, once you have debate, Mr Mayor, once you enter into debate, it's all formal and you're
Yeah.
cut short.
Doesn't mean you can't ask questions though, Councillor. if
No,
you're in
this
debate.
isn't a question, this is a proposal.
Taking into consideration what the councillor's coming from, I'm happy to move the procedure that we go to suspend standing orders to allow for some free-flowing discussion, if that's what the good councillor would.
Well, that-
Yeah,
that's
all
very
right,
good.
councillors, I'm not unhappy with that. I just, I guess my mind's going back to last week and I don't want a 2-hour session in suspension of standing orders. I want to get this wrapped up because it's been going on long enough. All right, so move Councillor Bello that we suspend standing orders. All in favour? Carried
Thank you,
unanimously.
Councillor.
Thank you. Righto, Councillor Mather.
Mr Mayor, the principle of this is what I was looking at, okay? One sign, Marlborough, perhaps underneath 1 kilometre with an arrow. In a vertical, perhaps, a presentation, you can have the items underneath that on the same sign, similar to the principle of a totem pole, in a shorter version. Because when you look at all the items on the totem pole, pool's not open if somebody came into it. We could be selective as what we put on it. You'd have your Marlborough, you'd have your arrow 1 kilometre, and you'd have the most important parts underneath that would actually call you into the town. Now, I think it's worth considering, Mr Mayor, because what's been proposed I don't particularly like. It's not my town, it's our town. And we need to get what the people are looking for. As I said before, they don't know what they want because they haven't seen anything that's going to be effective, that's why. And I think if we use a principle that's simple, it's big, it tells you where you are, how far you get there, and underneath that, the most important parts are you've got a park, you've got a hotel, you've got food, you've got a museum, you've got a major crucifix rock. None of those things are mentioned there. So I think the council should, I don't want to be here all day either, Mr Mayor. We're all mentally fatigued the other
Well, we
day.
won't be, councillor.
We won't be, that's for sure. But coming along the road the other day, and I thought, that's the principle of what we need. Something simple, something that catches your eye, something that tells you what we've got in there.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Mata. Any other comments? Councillor Friend.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I'm just trying to sort this out to make sure that I have the correct information, that I'm going to be voting with the correct information. The $56,000 white Mulberry sign has already been committed to. So whether we go ahead with it or not, if we don't go ahead with it, we've lost $56,000, full stop. My question, I have a quick question to begin with, and that is, can the white Mulberry sign be swapped with the totem pole? Is that possible to use those funds and the metal already purchased for the totem pole instead?
Councillor, we would have to obviously go back to the artist and the fabricator to ask that. I know that the aluminium that was purchased for the sign was for that size. To change it, I don't know. I mean, I think in the end, obviously, as Russell said earlier, the totem pole style would be cheaper anyway. The reason for the cost of the other sign was the size, and Russell can probably answer that more than me. But again, we would have to go back. It's impossible to answer that question today.
So, and the second thing you said just not too long ago was that you've contacted the Mulberry residents and they were happy with the white Mulberry signage. However, they were concerned about the price of it. Is that what you said earlier?
Councillor Friend, that was only one person, and that was Sue from the Mulberry store. I haven't spoken to other residents.
And that was about the bull, not the sign.
More about the bull.
Oh, it was about the bull. Okay, not the white Mulberry sign.
Basically, she said they liked the sign in general, they liked the bull, but the cost of the bull was exorbitant.
Sure. So the bull's been taken off the table now. That's not even into consideration. What still concerns me, and it's the same old chestnut, the $56,000. Is there any way that we can recoup that by changing the ideal of the sign or the design of the sign?
That's a lot of sunk design cost in that type of design. If you do a different design, then that's an alternative cost.
Sure. So
You wouldn't recapture any of that 56 by changing the sign.
Sure. So we could use that metal for a different sign perhaps. However, we'll still use, and last week you mentioned that the design itself, the design costs were about $20,000, is that right?
I can't recall. For this sign,
For the initial design of the large Mulberry sign,
I believe it was around that. I don't know. the
around that.
That
So-
included the bull as well.
Oh,
Sorry,
that
Councillor.
included the bull.
Yeah,
Okay. So basically, no matter what we do, whether we go ahead with it or not, we've lost out. Correct. Okay, thank you.
If you go ahead with this sign,
If we go ahead with the large Mulberry sign, we won't lose out. If we
Correct.
go ahead with the totem pole sign, we're still losing out
Correct.
on that 56,000. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Councillor Eastwood.
Just going back to, I think it was number one, if we can go.
Recommendation A.
Recommendation A, yeah. What to have the big Marlborough sign, why would we then want an additional smaller sign?
Councillor, one of the main comments from both even Sue last week and the councillors from the last meeting was the fact that the sign just says Mulberry and it doesn't indicate where Mulberry is and when to turn. So the idea was to make that clear. This was a response to commentary.
Can't you have a turn left near the big sign?
Well, that is the idea, sorry, councillor. It's to have the white Mulberry sign and on top of it just have 1 kilometre and an arrow pointing left.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
so that's my bad. Okay.
Councillor Watson?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, Sonia and Russell, with the one, that's sort of what we were talking about when we talked that day. Is that still a similar sort of idea to what you're thinking?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm just,
Well, we would have to ask the designer. I was thinking that would be a...
must be turned.
That there would have to be, it would be a separate sign. It said,
Yeah.
1 km with the arrow.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking, because obviously we'll have to have people reading in back to front if it was cut right through. So I was just wondering if that had been thought of when you were thinking that, that's all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you've got 1 minute that side, and when you come from the other side, it's written back to front, that's all. That's right, I just thought I'd bring it up, just in case it hadn't been thought of, and we got down the track and went, oh, that's all.
I am thinking both ways.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillors, sorry, a question of the officers. Councillor made this question originally about 2 entrance signs. We haven't addressed that yet.
That original budget didn't allow for those 2 entrances. I thought that when conceiving of the project, that the majority of people were stopping at the Puma. People who were coming in from that other direction were more likely to be locals, so that there was the opportunity to capture people who were coming into town at the Puma. That's why you had more of the informational signage at that point in time.
All right, thank you. Councillor Mata?
The majority of the visitors come from the south, Mr Mayor. I think that the assumption was wrong. I don't think we've done our homework on this to see where they're coming from, what they're looking for, but I do know that the locals are very adamant about what they have to offer, and this is what they want to capture, whether they come from the north or the south.
All right, thank you.
Mr Mayor, I think too, when you're looking at one entrance, whatever the outcome is, the B is predicated on what is accepted in the A, because not many, if any, of those additional things will be able to be captured in the same budget, especially if this 56 have been sunk, if that's the word. I priced the benches yesterday from Humes, $1,868.74 plus freight.
Sorry, benches for
The
what?
benches, if you had a park bench with a table, we talked about.
So you're looking at recommendation C now, are you?
No, I'm just saying for the interest of the table, if whichever way we go with A, recommendation A, whatever we decide on A,
Yep, impact
Okay.
B.
yes,
Yeah,
B will be
understand.
predicated on A.
Yep.
And if you're looking at costings, nobody's done any costings with all the other things, so we don't know how much money we're going to have left over. What, if any, of those things can be captured in any surplus funding? And I'm just saying, I did the extra homework, contacted Humes, $1,868 for a park bench. That's just a ballpark figure, but that is the figure. And plus $420 deliver on site,
All right,
plus GST.
thank you, Councillor. Right, any other questions? Councillor
Just
Watson?
quickly, Mr Mayor, through to Russell and Sonia, with Glenda's Councillor Mata asking about the 2 entrance signs, we've already got a cost of $6,400 for that single metal sign, which you said we'd probably end up going with something like that. Well, then if we're not spending the $38 on the bull, we've clearly got $6,500 to spend on the second sign.
Yes, there is. If we're not doing the other signs, then there is the opportunity in the bull. Then there's capacity to do that other sign if that's what it so desires, depending on what that looks like.
Councillor Bello.
Picking up on, don't know. That one. So is it about perhaps at some stage amending the motion to reflect possibly that the second entrance needs to be signed in some format, as Councillor Watson's indicated, and also that the totem style or direction or informational signage about Mulberry, which would appear at somewhere near the white sign, would have some sort of a cap on it so that we've got some control over the spending on it. I think if those elements were captured in there, it probably gives a little bit more certainty around what we're going to end up with. Two signs, both entrances. One is the main one at the Mulberry, the big white one, and there'll also be a secondary sign there to provide those that do get captured by the big white sign what is in Mulberry that we're going to go in to see.
Well, Councillor, the process I was hoping to follow was, as I said earlier, address recommendation A first. If, depending on the outcome of that, we may or may not have to adjust recommendation B and so on. So that's, I think, the logical sequence to follow at this point. I hope that addresses your question, Councillor.
Yeah, it certainly does, Mr. Chair. And
Councillor Mata.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for the officers. Can the material that's already been purchased be accommodated, as well, to consider, can accommodate something along that principle? A sign that says Marlborough, it has an arrow, and it has a number of, not all of the totems, selected ones, the main key ones. Can that material that we've purchased already, the sunk ones, accommodate something of this nature, which means you could have two signs of the same quality, the same message, one on either side at each entrance?
Councillor, those are highway signs, and they would
I mean,
be...
it wouldn't have to be like that, but it'd be the principle of that.
I understand the principal thing. DTM are pretty protective of their design standard, and they would not want anybody replicating that or being similar to that, so it would have to be something else. I understand what you're trying to achieve with that, but we'd have to take that into consideration.
So it's not going to cost us anything to find out if TMR would be agreeable to that. What I'm trying to do is get the best dollar for our money, because sorry? Yes. A phone call. What I'm thinking, Mr. Mayor, that we can have money, if this is as simple as I believe it is. Once we grasp a principle, it's a matter of just getting the shape and getting the right items, the totem poles. Because what I'm thinking too, if you put that big white thing with all the letters, it's not going to be on the highway. It's going to be off the highway. How far off the highway? And if you have a totem pole that says these are all the things that you can get in there, you're not going to be able to read them at 80 kilometres an hour.
No, I
I'll read them.
understand the comment, Councillor Mata, and I also understand what the officer's saying in the sense that TMR is very protective of its design. What you're proposing undoubtedly could be done, but probably with just a slightly different. Let me finish. Slightly with a different format. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, yes.
Right, councillors, can we go into debate now, please? I think we've tossed this around enough. So can we come out of resume standing orders? Thank you, Councillor Bello. All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right, councillors, in addressing recommendation A, Justy, can we scroll down? Thank you. That council resolves to continue with the white lettered Mulberry signage design concepts, refer attachment 1, with an additional smaller sign stating 1 kilometre and the left arrow. All right. Can I get a mover and a seconder for this one, please? Can I get a mover first of all?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Councillor Friend, Councillor Eastwood, thank you. All right, we're in debate now, councillors. Councillor Friend, would you like to speak to the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, I've moved this as I moved it again last week. My stance hasn't changed. Large white lettered Mulberry signage. Some residents may not want it, some may want it, some may like it. The issue I have is the $56,000 that I don't want to see going down the drain and taken out of the ratepayers' money if we don't go ahead with this Works for Queensland. And that's the only reason why I'm moving it. So my stance hasn't changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Friend. Would anyone like to speak against?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Mata.
Nobody likes to lose money, Mr Mayor. Certainly we don't like losing anything on behalf of our ratepayers. I feel that we haven't explored whether we can actually put that money into an alternative design. I don't want to lose the money. We certainly don't want to lose it back to Queensland. But we haven't explored the possibility of having something of this nature with the money that we've already spent. Isn't that correct? And all we need to do is to find out if we can do it and not lose the money, Mr Mayor. I find the Marlborough lettering, and if you're looking at a totem pole, it's not going to work. I think it's hideous, to be quite honest. That's my opinion. And you're not only looking at one entrance. You're going to throw all your eggs in one basket, and it's not really going to give you what you want because you're going to be too far away to see any totem pole. Mr Mayor, I think we'd be making another mistake if we were to go with this.
Thank you, Councillor Mata. Councillor Eastwood is second. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Look, it's always difficult endorsing something that perhaps you're not entirely happy with. But we're in a situation where we could lose money and lose face. And I just really believe that not only for the citizens of Marlborough, but for our entire Livingstone Shire, it wouldn't settle well to see us throw away 50 grand. And that's essentially what would happen. I believe that we need to go ahead with this sign, with the adoption of the 1 kilometre arrow. You know, lessons have to be learnt from this. It's been a bit of a dog's breakfast, but we need to make good out of it. And the only way we can do that is to go ahead on this route and make the best of a bad apple, I guess. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Would anyone else like to speak against the resolution, please?
Yeah, I'll speak against the motion today as I did last week. I think this solution is related to a desire on behalf of council and on behalf of the community to provide cause and provide reason for people to come into the township of Mulberry. And when I've spent the last week speaking to some members of the community, they all talk about that spark, that there needs to be a reason for someone to come in. There needs to be something that draws them in. And, you know, some have said that the signage hopefully will achieve that, and some loved the bull, some of them disliked the bull. A couple mentioned the price tag, as the officer highlighted. But they all then spoke about, well, okay, well, what happens when they come into the township itself? And it, I think, comes to the crux of all the conversations that we've had in recent weeks, that when it first came to light, or when it first became, you know, ever present that we're about to spend $140,000 on signage, but not actually achieve anything to improve the township itself so that the experience of visitors would be improved, we said, well, that's not quite hitting the mark. That's not achieving the outcome that we're looking for. We're looking for something more. And at that time, we talked about, well, where's Marlborough? Well, it's 200 kilometres roughly north of Rockhampton. You know, you've got roughly about a 2-hour drive, so maybe it's the next stop where you take the kids on the way. And it made me start thinking about other communities. And one of the communities I know I spoke about with Councillor Watson was about Merriamvale. And Merriamvale, again, is a relatively small community that has a relatively small asset base. Like, you know, there has been times when there's been multiple shops there, multiple petrol stations, a cafe, a bakery, etc. But there's also been times when it's been pulled down to very limited number of businesses and times when it looked like the poor township was really struggling. Gladstone Regional Council, in looking at that community, saw in some ways a similar problem to ours, is that how do you get people to turn off the highway? Their solution was to identify a market for that community, and for them they identified families. They said, well, Merion Vale's roughly 2 hours south of Rocky, so if you're going to stop with your kids, you need to take them to the bathroom and you need to give them somewhere to play. Now, they invested some $4 million in Alf Larson Park, but the outcome is that every time that people from our part of the world or people from further north, as they're travelling along, it's a destination that you stop on the way. And even for people who don't have kids, they still go there and enjoy the space. Now, I don't believe and don't think that it's responsible for us to say, well, we'll just copy them and we'll just put a park in and that will solve the problem. But I think when we come to the crux of the question that we're being asked is about how do we draw people into the township, it's not a sign outside the town that says 1 kilometre away that you'll find a bakery, or that you'll find, there's got to be something in that township for them. Now, that might mean that we need to go back to square one. That might mean that we need to say, hey, on this occasion, we thought we identified the problem, we came up with a solution, but maybe it wasn't the right one, and maybe it is that beyond the fact that we will get to retain the product that's been purchased from that $56,000, that $56,000 is lost with very little return. But I would prefer to fail fast and go back to the drawing board and think about what truly draws the people into this township if we're looking at providing a future for it, in attracting what is the audience that we're looking for. Is it permanent residents or is it passers-by who are travelling? How are we going to get them there? Rather than move forward with something that, because we've got the funding and because we've got to spend it and make an investment that we might find doesn't achieve the outcome we're looking for, doesn't meet the market that we're looking for, and so that we end up having to go back and spend more money investing, doing something else later, and probably in short supply. I think, if you are going to make a mistake, you accept that you make mistakes. Not any of us are infallible, but you make it quickly, you don't drag it out, and you don't live with something and go, oh yeah, that was the mistake, that we saw the train coming, but we didn't want to get out of the way because we thought if we just pushed it over the line that it would be okay. And for those reasons, I won't be supporting recommendation A or recommendation B. I believe there's probably some merit in recommendation C, but again, whether we should be looking to expend the full Works for Queensland or whether we should actually have the fortitude to go back to the Queensland government and say, hey, we know that we've got a Works for Queensland for the next 4 years, it's guaranteed. On this occasion, we were unable to expend the full amount that was assigned to this project, and we're willing to return it because we recognise that it's the funds of the Queensland residents as it is the funds of Livingstone ratepayers, and we're not going to frivolously spend it just so that we can make sure that we've spent the budget by the time of the June deadline. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Would anyone like to speak for the resolution? Councillor Bello?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and fellow councillors and officers. This morning I asked myself a question: have I given up on spending $140,000 in Mulberry? And the answer to that question is no, I haven't. How are we going to spend it? That's the decision still to be determined here. We don't have $4 million like the community of Merion Vale did. We've got $140,000. Is it going to achieve everything that we could possibly hope for the community of Mulberry? No, but it's a start. Initially there was $40,000, and I think the lessons learnt, hopefully, for this organisation will be there was $40,000 allocated for distinctive signage. For whatever reason, it has gone above and over that, and at this point there's $56,000 committed to that distinctive signage. Whether you like the sign or not, it is distinctive. So for that, I say well done for a distinctive sign. Thankfully, we've had the sense to remove the costly ball, which a lot of people liked as well. And if the budget had been bigger, we may have added the ball. But unfortunately, or fortunately, we've been able to, I guess, collaboratively put forward other options that are going to see more benefit spread across Mulberry through placemaking initiatives, which will come in the later parts of this motion, which I think will be a great asset for Mulberry and something we can be very proud that we've been able to direct a significant amount of money towards shade structures, which will be vitally appreciated by the grey nomads that'll call in there, perhaps a family that's called off the highway to have a cup of tea, or they've stayed a night at the pub and enjoyed one of the best steaks in Queensland. This will go some way to achieving that. It will not achieve everything, but it will achieve a start. And I'm confident that we're going to learn a lot through this process, and we will see further signs rolled out across our wonderful Shire, which we know they've all got their own little unique elements that they want to showcase, whether it be the Byfield Firm, whether it be the crab down at Keppel Sands, the emus at Emu Park. This is the start of a journey. It doesn't matter so much how you start, it's how you finish. And I think we can finish today here in a positive way. And so I'm prepared to support this, to look forward to contributing to the other elements of the motion, which I believe will get better and better as we go through. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bello. Anyone else like to speak against the resolution? All right, councillors, we'll conclude debate and we'll go to the vote on this one. So Councillor Mata has called a division on this one. So all those in favour of the recommendation, please stand. So we have Councillor Eastwood, Councillor Friend, Councillor Watson and Councillor Bello. Those against? We have Councillor Mata, Councillor Ireland and Councillor Hutton. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now move on to recommendation B, that council resolves to include next to the Marlborough sign a totem style design detailing Marlborough's facilities and local business. Refer attachment 1. Councillors, can I get a mover and a seconder for recommendation B, please?
Propose an amendment to that.
Yep.
Something to reflect that we remove the word totem style, but we capture the intent of it, and so it's not restricted to a totem style, but it's an information type sign which details the Mulberry facilities. And there needs to be a big pardon? Yep, at both ends of to capture also both ends of the entries and exits to Marlborough. And ideally some sort of ceiling on what we're prepared to allocate to that, to achieve that. I guess the good signs that, or the signs that the good councillor has put forward there may well be within that scope, and I'd imagine they would be not overly costly, which would then achieve those entry points as well. So has that made any sense, Mr. CEO?
Perhaps the CEO can assist Justine for a moment while we do that. So there's 2 additional elements. So an additional sign for the second entrance, or the southern entrance into Marlborough, and a ceiling on the cost allocation to that. Councillor Bello, is that correct? Councillor Bello?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Bello?
Yeah, I was just reading it, Mr. Chair.
No, it hasn't been put up yet. I'm just asking you for your wording.
It was a question.
It was
It's
a
hard
question.
to have 2 conversations at once.
Yeah, I know.
apologise.
Most conversations need to go through the chair.
They certainly do, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair.
So we're putting an addition to this to state that there will be signage at the southern entrance to Marlborough and a ceiling on the cost allocation to this. Is that right?
I believe that's what I'm proposing in the amendment, yes, Mr. Chair.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor, can I just finish off that first and I'll come back to you if that's all right? So we've got council resolves to include next to the Marlborough sign an information sign detailing Marlborough facilities and local business at both the northern and southern entries. Maybe you need to put this into 1 and 2, Mr. CEO. That Council 1 resolves to 1 include, and 2 places a cost ceiling, if that's the right word, Mr. CEO, of, and this is the question mark, so I might leave the councillors to ponder that one, and I'll go to Councillor Mather for her question. Councillor Mather?
I'd like to know, Mr. Mayor, what is the southern signage going to look like? The southern main signage?
My understanding from Councillor Bellow's amendment is that it will be a sign detailing the local businesses. Councillor Bellow, is that correct?
Mr Chair, I guess without getting too much into the detail, I would hope that we could, whether it be to delegate to the CEO to come up with appropriate location signages as is displayed by the good councillor here previously, which was put forward as a solution for the signs. So we've got examples there, whether they could be included in the report if need be, to say, as similar to examples provided within this report, and I'm happy to reference Councillor Mata provided them. So
Okay, well,
something of that nature.
Councillor, point one's going to have to be changed then, because at the moment that reads to resolve to include next to the Marlborough sign an information sign detailing Marlborough facilities and local businesses at both the northern and southern entries, and that will be just you wouldn't be having another white sign on the southern entrance.
No.
So that's not capturing what you're intending then, Councillor Bellow, I don't think. Councillor Watson.
Could I say we look at it being maybe a kilometre up the road at either end of the entrances, so that as they're coming up, they've got things as 1 minute or 1 kilometre or whatever it happens to be, and it has a list of those things so people have time to think about what they're going to do to turn left or turn right, or whatever it happens to be, depending on which end they're approaching the town from.
So currently, as it's worded, Mr Mayor, there are 3 signs. There's one next door to the Marlborough sign, there's one north and there's one south. If I'm understanding correctly, we're abandoning the one next to the Marlborough sign and we're putting one that's got information about facilities and local business, either in the style of Councillor Mata's or something equivalent. North of the northern entry and south of the southern entry. Am I understanding that correctly?
Whatever distance it's decided, whether it be a minute or a kilometre or something like that, so at least people, families have got ideas on what they're going to do.
Yeah, so it's a departure from the recommendation, so we need to be clear about that, so I'll
Well, if that
polish that up.
what's in shading now disappears, that makes more sense to me at the moment. So rewording that would be resolves to include an information sign detailing Marlborough facilities and local business, as well as okay. All right, so we'll try that again. Resolves to include an information sign detailing Marlborough facilities and local business at both the northern and southern entries. Right, so we still haven't addressed the issue then, councillors and Mr CEO, of an entry sign for the southern entrance to Marlborough. Well, we're including an information sign at the southern and northern entries, but there's no reference there about an entry sign. Bearing in mind, an information sign in my mind is what services, etc., are in the town.
Mr. Mayor,
So, sorry, Councillor
am
Eastwood.
I able to put a question to the officers?
Of course you are.
I just wondered whether it would be possible to even contact DMR, who these type of signs are made by, and see whether they would be interested in putting up a sign. At no cost to council.
Depends on where it's located, council. Yes. I mean, they do highway signs. If you're going to do it on Perkins Road, for example, then that would be, I mean, I don't know where they would see the limit of their jurisdiction. I mean, they've got the standards for where they would place those. So that particular, at least the southern entrance, because of the width of the road right away there, I don't know how they would look at that. That's the kind of sign that you would normally get, as you can see from that example that Councillor Mata showed. That was 21 kilometres away or something. So that's what those are normally used for, not as an entrance sign.
What, Councillor Hutton?
I just want to check in with Councillor Mata. So the Mulberry community with the 2 entrances actually does have just those brown signs that say Marlborough to guide people into those entrances already?
There are 3 signs at either end of the town. 3 signs from the north
Okay, so there is entry signage per se.
I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess the reason I brought that up is if you're travelling with a family, sometimes when you get upon the town, it's too late. But if you have a sign like that that says 23 kilometres, 20 kilometres, 15 k's, or whatever, it actually prepares you that there's a town that has those amenities coming up and you're able to stop there.
All right, councillor. So, Councillor Bello, this is your amendment. So,
Yeah, and probably the only thing I'd like us to consider there was some suggestion from the Mulberry community that actually itemising individual businesses as such, given that they can change, they can come and go. What was the feedback? I thought it was more of a generic information, in terms of museum, swimming pool. What's the feedback there? That would be important information you think that needs to be captured in that?
Council, we asked a question in the first survey about what they would like to see as on directional signage, and the list that is currently on the Totem Pole is what came from the community. At that time, it was intended that information be brought forward from the entrance to the township where they have that sort of higgledy-piggledy sign, and that would be brought forward so that people who are turning off at the Puma station would then understand what is in the town and know that there is a town and that it's 1 kilometre away. So that was the intention. You wouldn't be able to put all that information on a highway sign, so that then goes to the question of where does that information that they asked for come from? Does it just stay on that existing sign, or do we replace it in some other form?
So this motion here, though, I guess importantly, does it capture the ability for the officers to install those information signs with those elements that were put forward by the community? That's what what's vitally important, I guess, that it articulates that. So with what we've got there, results include an information sign detailing Mulberry facilities and local businesses approaching both the north and southern entries. In your professional opinion, does that achieve that, Russell?
If you list those at each entrance, yes, whether it's in whatever format
Yep.
it's in.
Absolutely.
But if that's the intention and not something out on the highway.
No, we're looking. We've committed we have committed to the big white signage as the headline act. It's caught them in, and now we want them to read what's
Right.
open up the pages and what's within the story of Mulberry.
Right.
And these signs are, the intent is that these signs will capture that enough for them to go, yeah, let's go in there. We've got a photo next to the big sign. It's pretty awesome. Let's go in and have a look at Mulberry.
Okay.
That's the intent, I guess,
Right.
that I'm putting forward.
Yes.
Okay.
That was.
And the only other element to that, I'd like some assurance or protection that the costings of those are going to be commensurate with, I guess, the budget. So we're not going to. So can you give me some indication, or it's been nominated there? I think $6,400 was one monetary amount put forward for Councillor Watson.
Yeah, that's the You're Wanted sign. I think, Russell, you said around about 2 metres square, I believe?
Correct.
Something like that? Yeah.
So that sort of money would be satisfactory, in your opinion, to be able to capture that information
On the same similar format sign, a single sheet of metal, you could do that.
Okay, well, I'd be comfortable to propose as an amendment, that ceiling be put on as is in the report earlier on of $6,400 or thereabouts. So that would be what I'd be looking forward for, some sort of assurance that we're not.
all right, well, it's your amendment, so we'll put that in, Councillor Bello. So, Justine, item 2 there, we'll put in places a cost ceiling of $6,400 for the delivery of the signage.
Mr Mayor, just for clarification, that would be per sign?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Given, I guess, that the TMR signs that were significantly large highway signs were approximately 5,000, I probably myself think that 6,400 is a little bit more than I would have liked to have spent, because it may. Well, does it allow us? What's the balance then? Does it allow us for the shade structure of $50,000, for example?
So you're proposing 6,400 in total then, councillor?
I'm looking to see that the money is, that we can capture those in critical elements of the placemaking, like the shade, which I think has been costed at 50,000. So if we work back from there, if I can put it.
All right, well, I guess I'm just seeking clarification on what you're asking for here, councillor. Is it 6,400 in total or per sign?
Yeah, I'm looking at working back from the total amount of 140 minus the 56 for the, or for the entry sign. And given that that will absorb a little bit more because we've added 1 kilometre and turn left, so that's going to obviously come at a cost.
That's correct. You also have installation.
Yep. So in order to, I'd be looking at the balance after the shade structure has been costed and installed, or costed for that, with the balance go towards that information signage, and work out what that is for you to work with. 140 minus, we know the shade's 50.
Councillor May, Councillor Bello, have you finished your statement? Councillor Bello?
The amendment's not completed yet, no.
No, okay. So I can go to Councillor, you're concluded for the time being. I can go to Councillor Mata for a question.
It just relates to what was said.
Councillor Bello. Councillor Bello.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're happy with me to go to Councillor Mata now? Okay, thank you.
Mr Mayor, just an observation that I don't think members realise that when you're talking about a shade structure, you've got 2 sets of swings and they're not together, which means you'd need 2 shade structures.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bello, you got another statement or question?
Yeah, I'll probably looking for some assistance in trying to put this motion together, that, or the amendment that essentially I'm proposing that in agreement that the other signages are important, we want to achieve them, but I want to put a ceiling on that so that we can also achieve approximately $50,000 towards the shade structure. Notwithstanding the good councillor's comments, we may not be able to achieve 2 shade structures at this stage, but 1 will be better than none, and the community's made it clear that that's what they're looking for. So if someone's good at arithmetic and we can see what the balance is.
Excuse Mr Mayor, I've just worked it out. We've got about 50,600 left over, but I'm not sure. Is GST added to this costings of our signs, or is it already included? Okay.
Yeah, well, Councillor Hutton, sorry.
So is one of the considerations is that the 56 is the sunk cost and doesn't provide for any further work, including the installation, so that the 56 won't actually cover the cost of the sign, even finishing the signage prior to installation, if it's all the sunk cost, so it's already done. Like that's the 56 is already spent.
That's correct. You still have the manufacturing of the letters and the installation. And bear in mind that the design of this sign was meant to be a prototype for repetition, so there's more cost in this particular sign than you would ordinarily have, because it was intended to be the pattern across the community.
All right, so just so that we can get this clear in everyone's mind, we've got 140,000. From that, we're taking $56,000 that we've already spent, which leaves us 84. Now, is there any additional money to be spent on that white signage?
There is, Mr Mayor. The actual cutting, delivery and installation of the...
Do we know approximately how much that would be?
I don't, that was all tied in that original cost estimates, and I don't have that in front of me, so I can't give you
Alright,
a
so
number on it.
if we take the... Sorry, 6,400. So if we assume both signs that Councillor Bello is amending here are 6,400 each, that brings us down to 71,200. But that doesn't allow for any additional costs for installation. So you might have enough for your shade structures, Councillor Bello? If that's 6,400 per sign. But it's all a bit of a stab in the dark.
Yep. Well, in order so that we're not stabbing in the dark, I'm proposing that the shade is of the highest, well, of very high importance. So I'd be looking to have that bedded into the motion, and to try and work out an unknown is a position that I don't like to be in. So without the total costings of installation of the sign, then I'm only guessing, and I'm not prepared to do that. But I want to try and move forward with it, so I'm prepared to test the table to put in order to try and get some sort of progress here, I'm prepared to put the shade structure as a priority for the community, and if need be, the balance of that be allocated to the remaining signs that we deem are important. That's about the best that I can come up with at this point.
Excuse me a second. Right, the CEO's just made a suggestion, councillors, which I think is a good one. We'll flip this around in the sense that, with your indulgence, Councillor Bello, we'll change your pardon me, amendment to reflect the fact that recommendation B is that the shade structure over the playground is the next order of priority, and then the balance of any funding after the signage has been installed and the shade structure built, any surplus funding after that will go towards the signage. That's your...
I'm supportive of that in the intent, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. So we'll just try and get some wording around this now, councillors. So we're all understanding what's happening.
Mr Mayor, if we've understood that correctly, the installation of the shade structure now becomes the priority over the information signage, and whatever funds are necessary to commit to achieve that will be done so. And
It becomes recommendation B.
It becomes recommendation B. And then the balance of funds will be redirected towards achieving the information signage as was discussed by Councillor Bello.
All right. Okay. Councillors, we all understand now what's happening, he says, with a rising inflection in his voice, denoting a question. So, we're all comfortable, Councillor Watson?
I'm sorry, I'm concerned we're going to end up with postage stamps at each end of the town, that's all. That's what I'm worried about. Sorry, I can't.
Councillor Watson, if this becomes an issue, I would suggest that maybe the officers bring a recommendation to the table that appropriate signage may be able to construct it out of council's funds as opposed to this particular grant.
All right, thank you.
All right, councillor, so recommendation B is that council resolves to install a shade structure over the playground. We want to be a bit more specific, Mr CEO, at Marlborough. Councillor Hutton.
I just wanted to ask a question in regards to, I remember in the last term of council, funds were expended on the facilities at the Mulberry playground. Can anyone recall a price tag to those additions? I believe we put a swing set and potentially a barbecuing.
Councillor Hutton, sorry, we weren't involved in that project. We'd have to track that to facilities, but facilities did give us an indicative price of the shade structure of around $50,000, but it could be cheaper or it could be, it just depends on the size.
Okay, I suppose I was asking the question because we may be spending $50,000 to put a shade structure over a $20,000 swing set. But I'm uncertain because I recall there was concerns at the time that the desire was to put playground in, but I don't remember there being a huge positive response to the equipment that we put in. Is there any opportunity for us to ask that figure from facilities just to inform this decision, please?
Indeed, Mr Mayor, and that information relates to two installations over the last number of years at Mulberry, including a Castle Spider playground in 2015 valued at $16,000, and then a half basketball court hoop and associated bits at the value of $16,000, although that was funded externally, but the value was $16,000.
Right, thank you. So Councillor Hutton, that satisfy your question? All right, councillors, so we're back looking at the alternate recommendation now from Councillor Bello. Yep.
Yep.
So recommendation B now, councillors, is that council resolves to install a shade structure over the playground at Marlborough.
Yeah, happy to move
Bello,
that, Mr.
you're
Chair.
moving that?
Yep.
Seconded Councillor Friend, thank you. Councillor Bello, did you wish to speak to the resolution?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly, I believe one of the greatest elements of our playgrounds and our recreation facilities is an investment in shade. Livingstone took it upon itself as one of the first councils in Australia to actually adopt the shade policy, which some of you may not be aware of, whereby when we build new playgrounds, we're actually going to incorporate the shade into that playground at the time and not to be added to over the next 20 years through sausage sizzles or thereabouts, because we identified that shade is absolutely critical in our climate. We're the skin cancer capital of Queensland and indeed the world. So I seek your support to allocate a portion of this Works of Queensland funding, which I believe the state government would be thrilled to support, $50,000 or thereabouts, to provide shade for the children of Mulberry and for the guests and visitors that come there. Will be a great placemaking initiative, and reminding us that placemaking is all about making a place more enjoyable to be in. And I think the playground, as highlighted by Councillor Hutton earlier at Mirrenvale, has wonderful shade. That's what makes it so enjoyable. Without the shade, our climate just makes it far too hot and ultimately dangerous for our children to play in. So I seek your support to allocate this portion towards that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bello. Is anyone speaking against the resolution? Councillor Mata?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I support shade structures wherever we have facilities for children. I was part of the debate and supported the debate when we got the policy going. I will continue to support shade structures. What we have here, it's a process that's gotten off the rails, in my opinion, because here we are 10 months down the track. We're talking shade structures and we don't even have a price. We don't have a price on everything we've discussed this morning. We're pulling ideas, good ideas, out of the air. We don't have a price tag on them. We don't know how much money we're talking about. We don't know how much the primary northern entrance, it's become the primary entrance because we do not have that sort of money for the southern entrance. We don't even know what we're going to put at the southern entrance. We don't even know if we've got any money for a shade structure. We are doing this all about face, Mr Mayor. It's not responsible. And I can't support it the way we're going, because we're going to have to do some very hard thinking when we get down the track and find out what it's going to cost us. The primary entrance itself, we don't even know what the price tags are going to be on that. There's so much to purchase, the material, sink funds. What about erection? What about all these other things that go with it? We don't even know what they are. We don't even know if we've got any money. You wouldn't do that in your household budget, and I'm sure I won't be doing with ratepayers' funds.
Thank you, Councillor Mata. Would anyone else like to speak for the resolution? Councillor Eastwood?
Well, first of all, I guess I want to endorse Councillor Bello's points in regard to the need for shade within our shire, in particular somewhere like Marlborough. And if we're going to have signs to tell people to go into a town, then you need to have something there for them and for their children. So I believe it's is really, really important, and I guess it's important we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one, and we mightn't be happy with some of the sign solutions, but shade is something that we all believe in. We all know that we need, and it's actually more than desirable. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Anyone speaking against the resolution? Councillor Hutton?
Yes. I'm quite torn with this because I actually believe the solution proposed by Councillor Bello is innovative in that it's redirecting funds to something that ultimately that community does need, whether it's natural shade or shade structures itself. That playground or that space in terms of the park has both some natural shade structures as well as a need for some permanent shade structures to be in place. However, my concern is around if the intention is to draw people into that community, is to provide them a space where, as with all placemaking, it's about giving people reason to linger, giving people reason to stay. Last week we were told at a meeting that the priority was seating and that the community said that they need more seating in the park. Today we're being told the priority is that the community needs shade. Now I'm not sure which comes first, the chicken or the egg, but I feel like the risk is that we, with the best of endeavour, expend money without a plan or without a master plan as to how we see that space developing, as to what we see as the priority for that community. And we either end up having to retrofit or we have to adjust plans to meet existing circumstances that are less than ideal, or as was the case when we first went and put in, they moved the swing set to then find out that the community weren't happy because it was placed under a tree that had pine cones or something, so the kids were getting spikes in their feet when they hopped off the swings. The endeavour, the driver is right. I just feel that when we're making choices to be expeditious because of false timeliness attached to funding timelines, the risk is we end up making further mistakes or make mistakes that we then have to go correct using ratepayers' funds into the future. And so I'd encourage councillors to be cautious around the decisions we make around the prioritisation, because like I said, we have been revisiting almost on a daily basis what that priority is depending on which members of the community speak to, and the solution is innovative, but I'm just not sure that it's going to give the outcome or provide for the community a long-term solution if we then find that we need to go back and actually retrofit or redirect. And is it that shade is needed over the pool as opposed to across the playground? I don't know.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Is anyone speaking for the resolution? Okay. I shall speak against the resolution, councillors, and I have the similar view to Councillor Mata and Councillor Hutton. I also support the notion of shade cover. As Councillor Bello correctly points out, we are the skin cancer capital of the world here, and it's a travesty that we have such a statistic assigned to our particular part of the world. When I was growing up, I was in that generation that didn't wear a hat to school, because if you did, you got called a sook and got ragged mercilessly. And thankfully, we've moved on from those days now, and we are far more informed about the dangers and risks associated with the sun and skin cancer. However, my view is similar to Councillor Mata's and Councillor Hutton's, as I said, because one, I'm concerned that we don't know how much we're actually spending here. And normally what happens is, you're well aware, councillors, when a report comes to the table, it is costed. In this situation, we are just whistling in the wind in terms of the amount of money we're spending. We don't know for certain. And I think Councillor Hutton's right. Ultimately, I don't think there's any shame in handing the money back if it's not going to be spent, because I personally would much rather go, as I said last week, to the community saying that, yes, we spent X amount of dollars on something that we won't be progressing with, rather than spending all of that money and making a mistake. So I'll be voting against it as well, councillors. Councillor Hutton, Councillor Bello, do you want to wrap up on this one?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. just thought come to mind. I wonder if we flipped these resolutions around and we had the shade as the number one. I wonder whether there'd be support for it there, so that the 50,000 was committed for the shade, first and foremost, and the balance went towards the signage. I wouldn't mind if we did that, but I would hate to think that we would lose the opportunity to try and strategise around how do we end up investing in the Mulberry community when we've got $140,000 to do that. It's not a perfect system, never has been, never will be. We're not pulling them out of thin air. We're pulling these solutions out of what I would call what leadership does. Leadership sees, it judges, and then it acts. That's what leadership requires. We've seen the issue that we've got before us. How do we spend this money? None of us actually want to be in this predicament here. But we're still entrusted, we're paid to make these decisions, we're paid to try and make solutions. I believe that spending $50,000 on shade is not something that is just a brainstormed idea that came up in the last 10 seconds. Because to me, that's something that is absolutely fundamental to our communities right across our shire. It's probably the easiest decision that I'll make at this council, to invest $50,000 in shade at the community of Mulberry. Absolutely, without a doubt. As is all the other playgrounds wherever we can invest that money. So, councillors, as I think Councillor Eastwood said, I urge you not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I urge you to identify where we can, through seeing, judging, and now acting, and getting a great outcome there. It won't be perfect. It won't be the last time we spend money in Mulberry either. There'll be ongoing investment in all of our communities. This is just a short stop on the line there of the future of Mulberry. And this is the chance to invest in it. So on that grounds, I'm happy if someone wanted to propose, even after this is either won or lost, that the shade be elevated back up top and the signage come underneath. To me, that would be a satisfactory outcome, because at least we would have achieved investment in that Mulberry community that they will welcome. Every summer that comes along, they will welcome it. And every visitor that comes along and who's turned off the highway will be thankful. Gosh, this council had the common sense to invest in shade in this park. Doesn't it make it a great park? Instead, they'll pull up and go, quick, get out of there, it's 50 degrees. Our kids are getting sunburned, let's go. We're heading south where it's a bit cooler. Thank you, councillors.
All right, councillors. Councillor Bello, are you proposing an amendment?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm pushing with this, and just purely said that if in the event that somebody else had the ability to strategise around it, but I suspect there'll be a lot more to play out in this, so I'm happy to test this for the time being.
All right, thank you. So, councillors, you've got the resolution in front of you. Moved Councillor Bello, seconded Councillor Friend, that council resolves to install a shade structure over the playground at Mulberry. Councillor Mata has called for a division, as I recall, Councillor Mata. All right, so all of those in favour, please stand. Councillor Eastwood, Councillor Friend, Councillor Bello. Those against? Councillor Mather, Councillor Ireland, Councillor Hutton and Councillor Watson. So the motion is lost. Okay, councillors.
We'll revert to the original recommendation here about the correction of signage.
We shall.
We'll redraft what was the original recommendation C without the change.
Okay, rightio. So just so Justine catches up, councillors, we're going to revert back now to the original resolution B. Good to go, Mr CEO? Thank you. All right, councillors, so the recommendation is that council resolves to install information signs detailing Marlborough facilities and local businesses approaching both the northern and southern entries. Everyone clear on the resolution, or the recommendation, I beg your pardon? All right. Can I get a mover and a seconder?
Just a question, Mr Mayor.
You can ask the question in debate, councillors, if you want to.
All right.
Yeah. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Okay, Councillor Hutton, thank you. All right, I'll second it, just to get the debate going. All right, Councillor Mata, you had a question? Okay, all right. Councillor Hutton, would you like to speak to the resolution?
In speaking to the resolution, I think one of the identified needs is around providing better information around the opportunities that exist when entering the Mulberry Township. As Councillor Eastwood said, if we provide this information 20 clicks out of Marlborough so that people can make a choice, go, oh, up ahead there's a town that's got a park or a town that's got toilets, etc., then they'll make a conscious choice whether to come in. Councillor May has advised us previously that there are 3 signs both to the north and to the south identifying when the turn-off is coming into Mulberry itself. However, there are no signs identifying the facilities available in the township. So this addition, while not achieving all the outcomes desired in the original intention of the budget commitment that was made last year, does at least go some small way towards providing additional information to help Wayward find for both residents and for visitors to the Mulberry Township, and provide them information to guide them on their attendance in the community.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Would anyone like to speak against the resolution?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I'm not supporting either of these recommendations today, Mr Mayor, because they're ill thought with the best intentions of everybody. There is no consistency here. This whole debate has been so disappointing to me personally. I've never seen such a scramble of ideas being thrown in and mixed and thrown out. You're right. We don't want a repeat of what we had. This should be the simplest thing. If people would get themselves up to Marlborough and talk to the people, they'd understand. I don't think we've seen too many visitors up there lately. I'm trying to go up there to talk to them. Did talk to them, 17 people at a minute's notice. They told me what they wanted. Yes, they want signage. They want appropriate signage. They haven't even got a direction to the toilet block. There is no sign to tell them where to go to the toilet. And we're making $100,000 decisions here with no costings, no idea of what sort of money we've got left over and what we could do with it. Certainly we want signage. We want consistent signage. We want appropriate signage, and we want it that we can afford it. Get none of those. We get to the end of the line after 10 months, or maybe more. This is what we've ended up with. It just disappoints me to no end, and I would hope it would never be repeated.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Would anyone like to speak in favour of the resolution?
It's a question, if I could, Mr Chair, before
Councillor Bello.
committing one way or the other. I guess to get some clarity around where we're at in the entirety of this. So this is out of the $140,000 to spend an unknown amount on those 2 signs, is it? Install information signs, didn't we? Approaching both the north. So have we got any idea on costings of those?
We'll defer to the CEO on this one.
Mr Mayor, the only reference in the earlier discussion, this is part of, this reverts to the discussion that I think you proposed, Councillor Bello, and we were working on figures that had been provided previously of $6,400 per sign, and you were contemplating a cap at the point that might have been that per sign or some smaller sum. And then at the time we decided to elevate the shade structure discussion and make this just about the surplus. But with that now not being the case, we've sort of reverted back, I guess, to your original proposal.
However, I guess I'm looking for assurance of, there appears to be the resolution there that doesn't have costings included in it. So how does the officers know?
Granted, and we can restore that with the consent of the mover.
So is the mover happy to have that included?
Definitely, yeah. No, my thoughts around this had been that we were going to that TMR sort of standard low-cost solution. I wasn't expecting that this would become the mammoth that ate the sign money. So I appreciate the addition as proposed by the councillor.
All right, councillor, so we're proposing a $6,400 sum in total. We're going back to the question again, or is it $6,400 per sign?
It's probably for me. I'm looking to, I guess, to the movers of the motion as to what their quantum is that they feel is appropriate, given that the previous one was working back from the 50,000 that would have been required for the shade. Now that that's not needed. There may be, obviously there's going to be a balance of money after the white sign is done. Then there'll be money left over that will go towards these if it's supported. At this point we don't know how much that is. And is the intent then to try and save some for other elements of placemaking in the community, or are we looking to have a heavier investment in this? So I'm needing direction from, I guess ultimately.
I'll go to Councillor Hutton, thank you.
Yeah, I'll take it on the advice of Councillor Watson around that $6,000 per sign, giving hopefully comfort to myself that I'd hope that it doesn't cost that much, but allowing that space to make sure that we've covered both the costs of the installation as well as the signage itself. Up to that $6,400 per sign, and then my thoughts had been that when we come to the next resolution, or Part C of the original recommendation that spoke about, I was hoping to add an addition to discuss some sort of master planning of placemaking improvements that could be included. So some of them will be really easy, quick wins, but some of them might be ones that we then have to look at for next year's budget or for future budgets to include. So instead of the criticism I've previously had is the ad hoc, let's get some of the master planning done, and if there's quick wins that we can do out of the existing funding this year, let's do it. And if there's things that have to wait, well then that's a responsibility that we carry for this community going forward.
Just one question, if I could, in response to that. Can we just get confirmation that the Works of Queensland funding can be used towards master planning or planning as such, or is it not intended purely for hard elements as such?
I'm not familiar with the full guidelines of Works of Queensland, just my understanding if a project's not through any planning effort.
Yeah, my understanding of the Works for Queensland program is that they are to be shovel ready per se. So I would assume, and sometimes assumptions bite me, but I would assume that probably master planning isn't covered within it.
I'm going to speak to the motion if I can.
Councillor Hutton actually is the mover.
Oh, he hasn't already spoken.
You've got to speak, right? So, someone against? Thank you. Anyone wants to speak against the resolution? Councillor Watson.
This is more of a statement. I'm concerned. Are we a sporting club or a business? We're trying to make decisions with no paperwork to say what these things are worth. I mean, you wouldn't do it any other way, and why are we doing this now? I just don't get it. It's really upsetting me that we're throwing money around and we have no idea what things are going to cost. It's actually pissing me off, to tell you the truth.
Well, we're in a formal.
Sorry about that word, but I'm just really upset about it.
Formal council meeting, and language, councillor, is to be kept respectful and legal. Thank you. All right. So, anyone speaking for Councillor Bello? Did you wish to speak for it?
Yes, I'm speaking for this motion. There seems to be strong a strong requirement from the Mulberry community that they would like their council to invest money in signage that is going to attract and help people find Marlborough. If I break it down, that's what I understand was certainly a big component of what the community was requesting, or that was what they felt was deficient. So if that's accurate, then I think it's a very generous investment in signage towards Marlborough. It's not easy when you've got several entrances into your town, but we're going to spend, thankfully to the state government, up to, what's that, about $13,000 on signage for Marlborough. And the other, the balance. So what a great outcome for Marlborough. It doesn't mean they're going to all like the signs. You'll never get land today where everybody likes a sign. That'll never happen. So we don't need to worry about whether people like it or not. The positive is we're investing into the Mulberry community, and I think the point needs to be made and reinforced, and we thank the Queensland Government for their Works for Queensland funding that we have been successful in getting, and Mulberry is going to get the best investment in signs of any other locality in our shire at this point in terms of their scale of population. And I say that with the utmost respect to Marlborough, but the population is quite small. There's not an enormous amount of offering there, but it's a great little town, and gosh, this is a significant investment. So I think we can achieve the objective, and that was to provide an attraction and information for people to get to Marlborough. If we can't do it with this sort of money, we'll never do it. So I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Sorry, all right. Anyone wishing to speak further on the resolution, either for or against? All right. You've had a go, Councillor. You once only. That's it.
Look, I'm just going to speak very quickly.
Councillor Eastwood.
Yeah, for it, Mr. Mayor. I think it's really, really important that we endorse this, because it's all right to have a town, but people need to know what's available in there. And I just think just on that very, very basic precept that I think this is to me more important than the actual big Marlborough sign. This lets people know what's going on. And yes, you know, we can work on stuff like shade structures later on, but we've got to get people into the town. That's what the town want, and so I'm going to stand behind this one, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Hutton, would you like to sum up?
Yes, and I acknowledge that the conversations we've had both today as well as last week have been quite challenging, and the challenges that we've identified are around, you know, seeking to make sure that we're matching the priorities of the community, seeking to match the desire of this council to make a difference and to help improve the community of Marlborough, seeking to make sure that the wayfinding that's provided for visitors provides reason or draws them into the community of Marlborough itself. Now, I, just as everyone here has been frustrated along this process and have had challenges that we've had to face ourselves around costings, around the potential for setting a standard that's been unable to be copied or matched elsewhere. With this particular part of the motion, and you know, it's well and truly on the record that I've not supported the last two resolutions that come forward, while we're not resolving in its entirety the challenges that the Mulberry community's raised, this is going some way towards supporting the intent of everything that's underpinned what we've been talking about, full stop. It's about providing some wayfinding, it's about providing information around the facilities to draw people into the township, but it's also recognising that the stomach of this table was never for the opulent signage that was an alternative produced in a previous variation. So while I accept the criticisms of the imperfection of this, and while I have no doubt that the officers will be able to achieve these sorts of signage for up to a price of this amount per sign, I think it's important that, just as councillors previously expressed a desire to see us not throw out the baby with the bathwater, that regardless whether this means that we have 50,000 left or 100,000 left, that's not the question that I want us to deal with, but rather is, are we making sure that we're taking steps towards helping this community, and is, for the expenditure of less than $14,000, this a step in the right direction, and does provide some information or some advice to that community and show that just as they're on the journey, so is this council, and that we're going to get there together. And I think it does, and I'd encourage all councillors to see this as not the end, and in no way would I say, hey, vote for this and you don't have to vote for anything else, but say that this is part of the journey, and this is about making sure that we take the community of Marlborough with us on that step, and don't leave them feeling left behind, to go from having an enormous amount being invested to find that actually the thing that they wanted, which was some simple signage, gets lost in the calamity of the events of the last meeting and the meeting this one.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. All right, we'll go to the vote on this now, councillors. So, Councillor Matha's call for a division. All in favour? So it's Councillor Eastwood, Councillor Ireland, Councillor Hutton, Councillor Bellow and Councillor Friend. Against? Councillor Matha and Councillor Watson. So the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. So, Mr. CEO.
Is the residual recommendation, Mr. Mayor?
Relating to the allocation of any unexpended funds, but the matter regarding subset A, the shade structure, has been determined earlier, so we would remove that and offer the balance for councillors' consideration.
All right, councillors. So the resolution will read that council resolves any unexpended funds remaining be redirected towards other township improvements in the following order of priority. It will be A, additional bench seating in park, B, solar lighting of park to improve safety at night, and C, a mural on the toilet block. Councillor Hutton, question, is it?
Yeah, I'm wondering around the appetite of the table. I'm actually quite happy to maintain A as part of it. My concern, as I think the concern that was expressed by both yourself, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor Mata, one of the concerns was around just having some planning attached to that to make sure that we're not doing something that we then need to retrofit or change. So I'm happy for it to remain as part of this resolution, but with the addition that we undertake, and it will be, as with all Works of Queensland, the cost of officers' time is ours anyway, so that council actually undertakes some master planning around this, acknowledging that we're happy to see the expenditure of these items on the basis that that master planning's occurred, that it's not just ad hoc. Okay. If that can be incorporated into the wording, Mr. CEO, so that council resolves to undertake some master planning of what's the name of the park there, councillor? Lions Park? Take some master planning of the Lions Park. And that expended funds remaining be redirected to improvement. Does that provide a little bit more guidance, or just support to remove the ad hoc nature of it?
I think we understand the intent, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
All right, councillors. Everyone understand the amendment? Right. So, Councillor Hutton, you're moving that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded, Councillor Bellow. Thank you, gentlemen. Councillor Hutton, did you wish to speak further to the amendment?
Only briefly, Mr. Mayor, and I think this is a time for us to reflect, and hopefully, in winding up the discussions of today, there are conversations quite often around the fact that no one likes to see how you make sausages, but everyone quite enjoys the fruits of the sausages at the end at the barbecue. And the journey that we've been in regards to seeing some changes or some improvements to the community of Mulberry, have been incredibly challenging. And as Councillor Mata said, there are lessons for all of us to learn from this experience, both in the probably in the budget process itself, as well as then the engagement of councillors and of the organisation and the community in the development stage, and ultimately to the resolution stage of this project. There are lessons for all of us. What I saw from Councillor Bello earlier today was a desire to make sure that we didn't lose out unnecessarily if we could find a way through it, and it really encouraged me, I have to admit, to recommit myself to going, okay, well, where can we find ways to try and make some of this work? And while I unfortunately was unable to find myself supporting the big ticket item in terms of the first set of signage, I believe, having removed the ad hoc nature of the undertakings that we may take in this playgrounds or in this park space, by improving this park, be it whether we're able to afford to put the shade in at the moment, or whether it's about putting in additional seating, whether it's about looking at the barbecues or solar lighting, what we're doing is making sure that not only have they got wayfinding to direct them into the township, they've got something that draws their attention, but when they get there, that there's additional elements that makes their stay enjoyable. It gives them reason to linger, it gives them reason to spend a little bit longer, which hopefully has a return for the community of Marlborough, and that's all the outcomes that any of us have ever tried to achieve. So I thank councillors for their wading through this mud, both today and in previous sessions, knowing that all of our intentions has been to be about getting a good outcome, and I'd encourage councillors to view this as an opportunity for us to continue that progression with the community, acknowledging that I believe that the outcome of the master planning may be that council needs to make commitments in further budget years around its own expenditure or further works for Queensland to finish off the job, to make sure that what we're producing in that community is something that is going to get people off that highway. Whether we can afford the $4 million of Gladstone, I'm not going to offer an opinion on that. I'm sure if the CFO was here, she'd be able to give me some very stern looks at the moment to confirm that that's not the case, but something unique and something that draws them into Marlborough, and this is a step in the right direction, and that's why I'd encourage the councillors to consider it today.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Is anyone speaking against the resolution? Councillor Mata?
Mr Mayor, I think it's back to front. I'd like to see and I take on board the good councillor and what his intentions are. Any unexpended funds should be redirected back to the community for a further discussion to say, what do you want to do with it? We haven't got a master plan, and I doubt very much whether we'd get a master plan under Works for Queensland. We're back to front. We need to go back and say to the community, I would be very surprised if we've got any money left over. I don't want to get their hopes up. Having something like this, you think, oh my God, we're going to have all these things. No, I would be very surprised if you got any of them. So I think if there is any money left over, that needs to go back to the community. All of us in present to say, what do you want? You're all here, what do you want? And then work a master plan around that.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Mather. Is anyone speaking for the resolution? Councillor Bello?
Just briefly, I think, as I said earlier, it's not so much where you start but where you finish, and I'm actually encouraged by where we finished, potentially anyway, with the support of this motion that I certainly hope that Council does. We don't know what the quantum of money will be left that can go towards this, but I think what it also critically, what it does do, through the process of interacting with the community, which would be part of actually the planning of, okay, we've got X amount of money, where are we going to put the shade that you would like, or where are we going to put the picnic tables that you'd like? And the community would be very much a part of that. That's what this provides for. Now, it may mean that the money runs out at only element, B, but through the process of doing and fulfilling this motion, we'll certainly identify what other priorities are there that we can then aspire to achieve in future funding rounds. So hopefully it's the start of the journey of improving through placemaking funding the desirability of Marlborough, and that's what we're here for. So I too, like Councillor Hutton, thank everybody for their contribution today. Whether it be a sporting club or a council, they're not that much different ultimately. We're all individuals coming from different strengths. we're all limited in really what our expertise is, but that's the beauty of a democratic council. And I think it's a wonderful thing if you can eventually get to a decision. And in this case, I hope it's a positive decision for this motion, because there's much to come from Mulberry there. So thank you, and congratulate Councillor Hutton for the amendment that's and the thought that's gone into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bello. Anyone speaking against the resolution? All right. Any other comments in relation to the resolution in general, councillors? Councillor Eastwood.
Oh, it's just a good common sense resolution, Mr Mayor. No point having signs leading to a town that lead to nothing, and this is going to beautify the town, make it a lot better place for people to pull over, and yeah, I just support it with my whole heart.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Councillors, just a brief comment as well. I will support this resolution. All the way through this process, my concern has been a lack of, I suppose, understanding of costing and potential lack of planning around it. The fact that we now have an amendment that indicates we will be planning or undertaking a master planning process in conjunction with this work, or the expenditure of this money, encourages me because the master plan will actually involve the community, and that's, from my perspective, a positive thing. I have no doubt, councillors, based on previous discussions with members of the community up there, that shade structure is important, and we've just dealt with that particular matter in a previous resolution. So I'm encouraged by this. I think it's generally a step in the right direction, because it includes the community of Mulberry, or will include the community of Mulberry, and it will bring costings to the fore, and we'll understand exactly what the money's being spent on. All right, councillors. Councillor Hutton, do you want to close? All right, thank you. We'll go to the vote on this one. So we have a mover in Councillor Hutton, a seconder in Councillor Bello. Councillor Mata, are you calling a division on this one? All right. You'll call a division? Righto. Councillor Hutton's calling a division. All right. So all in favour, please stand. So you've got Councillor Eastwood, Councillor Friend, Councillor Bello, Councillor Hutton and Councillor Ireland. Those against is Councillor Mata and Councillor Watson. Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors, and thank you for your perseverance, and thank you to the councillors who've brought amendments and have obviously given this a good deal of thought. This has been a long and arduous process, councillors, and I congratulate you for sticking with it. And given that that is the only item on the agenda, I thank members of the community viewing it on live stream for persevering with us, and thank the councillors and the press for their attendance, and we'll close the meeting on that basis. Thank you very much. Have a good day.